Okay, so let's go over a basic practice routine for all of the sounds that I mentioned in the last video. I want to give you this routine because it will be better than just practicing randomly and expecting to get really good results. And it's also nice because when you practice the same thing over and over, then you can actually notice that you're making progress. So I want to give you 4 different beats that you can practice, and we'll jump straight into the first one. So I've put out all the notation on the bottom of the screen, and it sounds just like this. So this is just the boots and cats rhythm that we've already done. I'll keep moving on. The second beat is like this. Make sure that you have that rest there where you're not doing anything. The third pattern is like this. So this one is a bit different because it's in 3/4 time, which if you don't know music theory, you don't have to think about it too hard, but basically it just means that there are 3 beats per bar as opposed to 4 beats per bar. So for this one, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whereas for the boots and cats thing, it was more like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the hi-hats were kind of like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. So that's the difference between 3/4 time and 4/4 time. We'll go back to pattern number 4, beat number 4. So that looks like this. It's just like the boots and cats thing, but now we have a double bass kick at the very beginning. So you might have to slow it down to practice it, but it sounds like this. Okay, so those are the 4 beats that I want you to practice. And now I have a few notes about how I want you to practice all of them. So the first note is about timing. So I want you folks to grab a metronome, and I'll show you one here on my desktop. And you can just search for a metronome in Google and it'll bring one up. A metronome is a tool that will make sounds at some regular tempo, and it is measured in units of BPM, which is beats per minute, or how many sounds it makes every minute. And you want to be able to use this metronome and stick to the speed that it's given. So just like that. So let me show an example now. I'm just going to play that in the background, and I'll do the 3 different I'll do the different patterns now. So, ready? Okay, so those are all 4 of the beats, and how I would how I would beatbox along to the metronome using those 4 different beats. You can notice that beat number 3 is kind of like half as fast as the other ones, and that's intentional. There's some music theory behind it, but basically that's how you should be practicing those 4 different beats. I will talk a little bit about the music theory now, so you can skip forward if you're not very interested. But basically, I want you guys to do it that way. So for patterns 1, 2, and 4, I want it so that there are basically 2 sounds per metronome click. And then for pattern 3, there should just be 1 sound per metronome click. And the reason is so that the BPM that you see on the metronome actually lines up with the BPM that you will see on an actual song. So if Locked Out of Heaven by Bruno Mars is like 140 beats per minute, I want you to actually beatbox Boots and Cats at 144 beats per minute. For songs that are in 4/4 time, The BPM, beats per minute, that's represented in quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the actual beatboxing happens on eighth notes. So remember when I was like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Those are all eighth notes because they're half as long. So I want you to make sure that you're making the sounds as fast as you need to. So for example, with Locked Out of Heaven, if it's technically 144 beats per minute, then you need to physically make sounds at 288 beats per minute, which is a lot of beats per minute, but I think you can get there. Okay, quick example. So I'll compare Locked Out of Heaven by Bruno Mars, which is in 4/4 time, and Lose Control by Teddy Swims, which is in 3/4 time. And I'm going to sing both of them at 144 beats per minute. But notice how Lose Control feels much, much slower. Ready? So I have my metronome right here at 144 beats per minute. You make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven for too long. And then something's got a hold of me lately. No, I don't know myself anymore. Yeah. So if you're beatboxing something in 4/4, you're gonna have to be much faster at the same BPM. In other words, patterns 1, 2, and 4 will take up 1 bar each, and then pattern 3, it's in 3/4 time, so it's going to take up 2 bars. So again, I'll maybe put them on the screen real quickly, but yeah, patterns 1, 2, and 4 take up 1 bar each, and they're all eighth notes, and then pattern 3 is in 3/4 time, so each of those sounds will be a quarter note. Okay, so yeah, it's important to know the BPM that you are going to set and to be able to pretty much memorize specific BPMs. Like whenever you learn a song, you should be able to memorize how fast it is. The same way that you might memorize, what note you're starting on based on a given root note. Start as slow as you need to and work your way up from there. There's no point in starting too fast if you can't actually make the sounds nice and loud and clear and consistent. So if that means 60 beats per minute, if that means 40 beats per minute, just start there and then work your way up. The fastest songs that you might sing might get up to like 140 beats per minute or more. Locked Out of Heaven was kind of a unique example, 144 beats per minute. But I'd say if you can get up to 120 beats per minute, you'll probably be pretty good for most of the songs that you might encounter in an acapella sort of setting. In terms of specific timings for each of the patterns, I'll put this up on the screen. Beats 1 and 2, you should get to 80 beats per minute. And then beat 3, you should get to 160 beats per minute. It's twice as fast because of the quarter note, whole note, double the length thing that I mentioned earlier. And then for beat 4, you can do that at 60 beats per minute. It'll be a bit slower because you have that double bass kick at the beginning. But yeah, just keep practicing until you get to that speed. Nice and loud and clear and consistent though. Make sure you're not getting there by making a bunch of really weird sounds. Okay, the second thing is to keep in mind breathing. So whenever you are doing these beats, I want you to be able to do them infinitely. Now, the way that you're going to do them infinitely is by adding breathing at just the right spots. I don't want you to add breathing in random spots because then it'll make it really inconsistent, which goes against that third principle that we talked about. So what I want you to do is take that last at the end of each of those beats and then replace it with a breath. But instead of just breathing in normally like I want you to breathe and make it sound like a hi-hat. So breathe kind of through your teeth and through your tongue and teeth and kind of pretend like you're doing a hi-hat sound, but you're actually breathing inwards as opposed to outwards. So like that. And like pull your tongue and your teeth in. I'll show it like this. Just like that. But you want to make it nice and quick though. And actually breathe in. It's really, really, really important that you do not just beatbox until you run out of breath. Please, please never do that, because it'll just be really awkward if in the middle of your song you have to pause to take a breath. Practice makes permanent, so don't practice any bad habits right now. So anyways, I'll put it up on the screen now, but take each of those rhythms and then replace the last TS with an inwards TS. So it'll be like t, 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 instead of a t, t, t. And I've notated that with little brackets around the letters. So if there's brackets around a sound, that means that you should breathe in during that sound. Okay, so now that you can breathe with each of those beats, you should be able to do these beats infinitely, like literally infinitely. So if I say that you should be practicing for a few minutes, you should be practicing for a few minutes with no stops. Now you might ask, okay, what happens if I run out of air or if I have too much air? If you're running out of air, if you feel like, oh my God, so for instance, the way that you could tell is basically just try to beatbox it as long as you can. And then when you feel like, I can't do it anymore, take note of whether you want to breathe in or do you feel like you want to breathe out. So if I'm like, then I just have to note that, okay, I really felt like breathing in at that point. That means that I was running out of air, and vice versa. So if it feels like you're really running out of air, then try to go back to each of those individual sounds and make sure that you're not releasing too much air. Again, try to practice by just holding your breath, and remember that you shouldn't be adding too much of that frosting to these sounds, otherwise it might just make them sound really breathy. If you feel like you're full of too much air, that is honestly a good problem to have. Maybe depends, as long as you can make the sounds nice and loud and clear. But if you feel like you're full of too much air, then you might need to release some more air. And it's better to do this on diaphragm-assisted sounds, so the K snare, rather than other sounds, because you don't want the other sounds to just get too breathy. So in the beats above, it's probably just best if you exhale a little bit more air on that K snare, and that should balance out the air. You'll have to practice this until you can actually get into sort of a rhythm, a repeatable rhythm, but again, you should be able to do things infinitely, and breathing is going to help with that. In terms of how frequently you should practice these things, ideally you want to practice all 4 of the rhythms a few minutes each, every day or every few days. And when you're practicing, it's really important that you record yourself, at least from time to time, record with video, and then that way you can see and you can hear what you're doing, because you might see things that you don't necessarily feel or hear by yourself. While you're beatboxing and also while you're watching back all these videos, you should be taking note of the 3 fundamental principles. Think about, okay, am I applying them well? Are there any sounds where I'm really quiet? Any sounds where I'm really breathy or inconsistent? Or am I breathing irregularly? Make sure that you're applying those principles and trying to fix any problems early. Also, feel free to ask around for advice if there are other beatboxers around on your a cappella team or elsewhere. Awesome. So we got to the end of this practice explanation, which actually took longer than explaining the sounds themselves, but it's really important to know how to practice and how to practice well. Again, really, please do not get ahead of yourself and don't try to do things too quickly. Focus on mastering these few sounds and making them loud and clear and consistent, and I promise you will reap the benefits. And then later, it'll just be really easy for you to add new sounds into your repertoire because you'll have all the practice. And adding all those new sounds is what we're going to cover in the next video.